LessWrong posts. I was pleasantly surprised to see that the first LessWrong post for this week is one of the major ones that spawned a whole lot of things, including, I think, like 2 episodes of the Bayesian Conspiracy earlier.
Yeah, we've definitely talked Newcomb's problem in the past.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Newcomb's problem and the regret of rationality.
I kind of don't want to go over Newcomb's problem again. I think everybody knows about it by now, but very briefly, a super intelligent AI, powerful entity type thing shows up in front of you, lays down 2 boxes, one that is clear, one that is
opaque.
Opaque, thank you. The clear one has $1,000 in it. The opaque one either has nothing in it or $1 million in it. It has nothing in it if Omega predicts that you are going to go and open both boxes and take the money from both of them. It has $1 million in it if Omega thinks you are only going to open the opaque one and let the clear one, I don't know, catch on fire or whatever the hell. You're just never going to take that $1,000. Then it flies off, and then you got 2 boxes in front of you and you can choose what to do.
Eliezer says that the dominant consensus in modern decision theory is that one should 2-box, and Omega is just rewarding agents with irrational dispositions. This dominant view goes by the name of causal decision theory.
2-boxing, to clarify, is opening both boxes and only getting $1,000. Well, and getting everything that's in both boxes.
Exactly, that's the thing. So if Omega's prediction or read of you or whatever is correct, then you only get $1,000 if you 2-box.
Yes, and if you 1-box, that means you are only opening the opaque box and getting only what's in that one.
Yes.
Which should be $1 million.
It should... My thought on this is still just like, I want the $1 million. It seems like a no-brainer to me.
Right.
The marginal benefit of trying to outwit a god by being the kind of person who can pre-commit to getting to 1-boxing and then actually taking 2 for an additional $1,000, an additional 1% gain... Or wait, 0.1%?
Right.
It's not worth it to me.
Yeah. My comment on the dominant view being you take 2 boxes and Omega's just rewarding irrational people, I really hope that isn't true anymore, because this was written like in 2007, 2008. It's been 15 years more since the LessWrong post was written. I really hope that decision theorists are smarter or something.
I'm totally willing to grant that I, as not a decision theorist, because I haven't finished reading Plane Crash yet, that's why
it doesn't make sense yet.
Yeah, I might be missing some central point, but I feel like my reasoning is pretty sound. But we've talked a lot about Newcomb's problem, so
yeah. And the post says, I pulled this out specifically because of the wording. If you have the power to pre-commit yourself to take 1 box, then you should do so. If you can pre-commit before Omega examines you and makes this prediction, then you are directly causing box B to be filled. I wonder if this is where the term pre-commit first comes up in the rationalist community, because it's a big vocab term for us, to the point where some people are annoyed that it is overused and used incorrectly as basically just a substitute for the word commit, which I saw this here and I was like, I think this is where pre-commit first cropped up in the sequences and where it went viral after that.
It might be. It's off the top of my head, it's the first place where I can remember it showing up. Pre-committing versus committing, I think they're kind of the same thing. Pre-committing is intended to be more of like a subconscious knee-jerk in my interpretation of it, right? Like, I think you train yourself to react this way immediately and automatically. Whereas, committing is like, I've committed to paying my bills at the end of the month, but it's something I have to do every month, and I make the conscious decision every month to do it. Hypothetically, it's all automatic actually, but for the example.
I would like to ask Eliezer exactly what he meant by the word, but yeah, to me, I basically agree with you. I think it's committing is like, I have a course of action that I am committing to, whereas pre-committing is more like, if a certain situation were to arise, I would be the type of person that does this thing in a more general sense.
Yeah, exactly. Like another good example from outside the rationalist sphere is like Sam Harris has a handful of episodes on like self-defense and how one not to, I guess, orient themselves towards like the possibility of violence. Basically, the average person, you can see it coming, get the hell out of there, right? In most situations. You want to train some automatic responses. Those are pre-commitments.
Yeah. I think a pre-commitment is much more like training yourself to be a type of person rather than
exactly
action.
The post, he's talking about building an AI that 2-boxes.
The idea is that if you built an AI and it is the kind of AI that would 2-box, if it realizes that Newcomb-like problems exist, it would self-modify to 1-box so that it could credibly be rewarded by being the type of AI that would just 1-box.
I feel like it would do the same thing the other way, right? if it suddenly realized that two boxing was the winning strategy, it would modify to do that.
Yeah.
My only contention with this as an example is that might be doable for people or for robots who can update their own, like who can literally change their mind.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not something that humans can do, or at least I can't.
I think it's definitely much harder for humans, which is probably why they need to be tortured in hell for a few centuries to get there.
Right.
Which brings us all back around to Plane Crash, because he does talk about agents with free access to their own code with a cheap method of pre-commitment. What does an agent with a disposition generally well-suited to Newcomb-like problems look like? It feels very much like Plane Crash right now, that we're talking about agents that can clearly self-modify to be more trustworthy in these situations.
Yeah, which again, it just isn't something that humans can do.
So at least not easily.
Yeah, it's trained patterns of action or thought, and those take time for me to update, right?
Yeah. I think I'm at the point where I would just one box in Newcomb-like problems.
I 100% would just one box, and I still don't get why people say two, but let's not open that box.
It's
that's the third box, and that one stays closed.
Yes, so we will one box on this question.
Yes.
I particularly liked a follow-up post, I don't know how long after this it was, at least a couple years, arguing that Newcomb-like problems are the norm, that in fact humans do predict what other humans are going to do a lot and offer or not offer them opportunities based on their own internal predictions. So actually humans are faced with this kind of thing a whole lot, and that is why it is better to be a good, trustworthy person, because it's very difficult to not be a good, trustworthy person and pretend that you are. Generally, people can see through that, and it won't last for very long, even if you do get away with it once or twice.
Yeah, it's way less work, and honestly, just way more rewarding, I think, to be a trustworthy one boxer. But, that's just me. Not throwing shade at two boxers. Again, anyone who says like they're a two boxer and here's why knows more about this than I do.
What's hard is developing a good decision theory that one boxes, by which he means coherent math which one boxes on Newcomb's problems without producing absurd results elsewhere.
My immediate thought was, I'm sure you're right, and I have no counterargument for that. And if it means that I'm not mathematically coherent on this position, I'm also okay with that. And I'm just fine. I'm just fine owning that and saying you're right, I'm wrong.
Yeah, he is not fine owning that and just saying that because he's trying to program a god.
And he knows the math.
Yes, and so he needs the math. And according to him in this post, he knows the math as well, although hadn't published it as yet when the post was written. I don't know if he has published it since then in a non-D&D fic environment, because I do not read decision theory papers. Advancements.
This takes me back to when I first read this post, because this is where he talks about this is a good idea for like a PhD thesis if someone wants to let me just give one and get a PhD for it. Mm-hmm. I remember reading that and being like surprised at the gravity of that sentiment. It was the first time I'd ever heard someone say anything like that. And I was like, oh, that's badass. Like, hey, I've got this thing that I feel like is like enough for me to skip to the front of the line at school credentials. If anyone's in a position to let me publish this, I'll do that for the credentialing. I just thought that was epic.
Yeah. Speaking of rationalist vocabulary, rationalist lingo, what is the term for a
jargon?
Jargon, thank you. Speaking of rationalist jargon, this is also the post where rational agents should win comes from. So we got, at very least, pre-commitment, one boxing, and rational agents should win, all from this one post. It's a big one in the history.
And the definition, if not the word, straw Vulcan.
Yes, it came from here as well.
Yeah. I don't know if he invented the straw Vulcan concept. I know Julia Galef was already involved in the community at this point, and she's the one that I believe at least popularized the term.
May have coined it, in fact.
I think coined it.
The idea of it starts here with, there's a lot of people out there who think that rationality predictably loses on various problems. That, too, is part of the Hollywood rationality stereotype, that Kirk is predictably superior to Spock.
I just remember from a presentation or something that Julia Galef was giving on that, where it's like a 10-second clip of Star Trek where Kirk beats Spock at chess. Mm-hmm. And Spock's like, well, I couldn't account for your irrationality. Mm-hmm. It's like, no, you just lost at chess. Like, if you can't account for it, then guess what? You're not actually smart. Like, this is not complicated. But
I mean, I could see that maybe being an objection in some other type of game, but specifically not chess.
Right. Not if you're supposed to be the smartest. That's the thing, is he gives like probabilities down to like 4 decimal places. Mm-hmm. I recommend really Galis book, the Scout Mindset. There's a whole section on Spock. We'll point at
what
that.
I could see? I could see Kirk like taking his knight and just moving it one square to the left. And Spock's like, you can't do that. Kirk's like, I can do what I want, motherfucker. I'm irrational.
So
Spock's like, I did not account for your irrationality.
Right. If Spock lost under those conditions, then I'd be fine with it, right? But he didn't call him a cheater.
Right.
In this clip I saw. Like,
yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, you started playing checkers with chess pieces. Of course you won. Like,
right.
I thought we were playing chess, but you're playing this other game this whole time. So sure, you win, right?
You may have said checkmate, but secretly the win condition was who has the biggest biceps. Booyah, bitch!
I mean, it's like that's the kind of reasoning you give to like a 3-year-old who cheats at Candyland, you know? Yes. And it's like, oh, I thought we were playing Candyland. If we're playing your game, then yeah, sure, you win, kid, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Going on, he says that a lot of people argue that it sucks that the algorithm of 1 to 1 box, if you're a human, doesn't follow the rules they like. Eliezer points out that Omega does not care about your algorithm. He doesn't care why you're one-boxing. As long as you're one-boxing, you get the money in it. And he says, it is precisely the notion that nature does not care about our algorithm, which frees us up to pursue the winning way. Follows this up with someone saying, to take only 1 box, you must somehow believe that your choice can affect whether box B is empty or full, and that's unreasonable. Omega has already left. It's physically impossible. And he replies, unreasonable? I'm a rationalist. What do I care about being unreasonable? I don't have to conform to a particular ritual of cognition. I don't have to take only box B because I believe my choices affect the box, even though Omega has already left. I can just take only box B.
I'm glad that he's defending my position. This, like I said, this is where he talks about rationality as winning. If this is where that started, I mean, you're right. It's part of the lifeblood of rationality.
Yeah. He goes, if you absolutely had to win, like really win, because your daughter's life depended on something, like the box that has your daughter's cure to her disease in it, then would you wish with all your power that the reasonable decision was to take only box B? Then maybe it's time to update your definition of reasonableness. Because alleged rationalists should not find themselves envying the mere decisions of alleged non-rationalists, because your decision can be whatever you like.
This definitely helped with, I can't remember the names of the posts, but the ones that basically describes Dutch booking, switching it to talking about lives, especially lives of people you care about, like putting emotional salience into it rather than just looking at numbers. I found that helped a lot, actually, and it was a smart move. I didn't need that here. Like, because it kind of helped flip something in my brain when reading one of the LessWrong posts like that. This is the thing: is like, all right, well, if your version of reasonable means losing, then we're talking different things. This actually this leads really well into the next 2 posts because it's kind of arguing by definition, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
I like the end where he says, "It is, I would say, a general principle of rationality, indeed, a part of how I define rationality, that you never end up envying someone else's mere choices.
Yeah.
Like you might envy their some genetic traits that they have or whatever, but if they're making better choices than you, that's not something that you should be envying because you can just start doing that."
Yep.
All right.
Well, that brings us to the Parable of the Dagger, which is one of those things that I was asked to read. And I believe this was the one that I did the 11 Labs test with to see how well it could do me and read a post, and actually did pretty darn well. This was where I was like, okay, I'm probably never going to get paid to read something again because it's 80% of the way there, and you're not going to pay 10 times as much for something that's only 20% better.
Yeah, other than mispronouncing your name, it did a really good job.
It did, yeah.
And I say that like like I'm being sarcastic, but I'm not. You have an unusually spelled name for an English reading robot.
Yeah.
Rather than that, it sounded like you. It was funny. Like it again, not enough to fool me for the course of a podcast conversation, but definitely enough to fool me for like a quick phone call.
Oh yeah, I liked the emotion that I put into the reading of some of the lines, the outrage of the jester, but. But like I said, that's 20%. You're still getting the core of the text, which is the really important part. Right.
You're getting something to read the text in your voice. You're not getting the you behind it. The sprinkle of English on top.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, this is the one where the jester makes a fool of the king by giving him a logic puzzle, and the king chooses wrong, and the jester's like, ha! If you had chosen this box, you would have a golden egg. Instead, you get a wet fart. And the king's like, all right, well, come back tomorrow, and you will have a puzzle, and if you choose wrongly, you die. And the jester's like, oh, well, shit on me. He brings him back the next day, and he sets out a logic puzzle in front of him. It's pick one of these boxes. The dagger's underneath one of them. If you pick the dagger, I kill you. The jester correctly solves the puzzle, picks the box, which, according to the puzzle, would have his freedom under it, and the dagger is there. And the jester's like, what the fuck? I did the puzzle right. And the king's like, I didn't pay attention to the puzzle. I put the dagger under a random box. You had a 50-50 chance of dying. Death to you, bitch.
Well, I think the king says, oh, I guess my reading of it, the king's only sentence was, it's entirely possible. I merely wrote those inscriptions on 2 boxes, then I put the dagger in the second one. I don't think he flipped a coin. I think he knew that the jester would solve the puzzle, but he's like, yeah, you're going to solve the puzzle and still lose. Because I got ravaged by an angry frog yesterday because he made me look like an idiot, so...
Oh, that's what it was? Angry frog?
Yeah.
Ravaging? Okay, cool. That's even worse. Huh. Okay, yeah, so maybe he did put it in the incorrect one on purpose.
Although I suppose it doesn't actually matter for the purposes of... The point is that the winning strategy here wasn't solving the logic puzzle. It was not pissing off the king, basically.
Yeah. The jester assumed that the riddle he was given had some relation to reality, and it did not. The two were uncorrelated, and he made the mistake of thinking that his map corresponded to the territory when it did not.
Womp womp. It kind of ties well into the next post, too, though. Because the point is like, what you can deduce from logic is only... I like how he puts it, that it can only tell you what you already kind of know.
Yes.
You can't get new knowledge from deduction. Well, see, this I actually draw a little contention with that, because you can learn, you can realize something new, but if you're a robot who could do all this math immediately, you would know this already. I think it's the difference.
Okay.
Like, as a thinking human, with our squishy meat brains that run all slow, you can sit there and I don't know, think of some sort of actual deductive situation and realize, this must be true then.
Yeah.
But if you had access to all the relevant facts and could think faster, you'd have just known that without having to spend time thinking about it. I think that's what he's saying when he's saying that logic can't teach you anything you didn't already know.
I guess we should go over what the parable is real fast.
Yeah, the Parable of Hemlock. Everyone remember how Socrates allegedly died of hemlock poisoning?
Heck yeah, I remember that.
He was sentenced to death for being too annoying.
I saw the coolest thing recently. Apparently, when he was voted guilty of being too annoying, basically.
But yeah, and corrupting the youth or something, too. They had to throw a real charge on him, but yeah.
Yeah, when they found him guilty of that, he then has to propose what his punishment should be, and then they vote afterwards on what his punishment should be. The number of people who voted for him to be killed by taking hemlock was greater than the number of people who voted for him to be guilty in the jury. I think it was a jury of 500 people, and like 260 voted for him to be guilty, but then 320 voted for him to be killed, which means that something like 60 people thought that he was innocent, but then when he was like, well, I shouldn't be published like this, we're like, all right, fuck him. He's innocent, but fuck this guy.
Yeah, if I recall,
we're going to kill him.
It's been a long time, but if I recall correctly, I think his proposed punishment was like, how about you guys give me a stipend and a house or something? Like, well, so I think that's I hadn't heard the part about people flipping their votes, so that might have been what flipped their votes, right? The response to the indignation. Yeah. And my specifics are probably wrong, but if I recall, I think his proposed punishment was basically a reward for him.
Nice.
So anyway, the parable that Yudkowsky gives is the students deliberating about, like, oh, he just drank it, he's going to die. Well, how do we know? Well, because all men are mortal, and Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal, and mortal beings die when they drink hemlock. It's true by definition. It can't not be that way. So then I forget how the parable ends, like he's fine.
He doesn't die.
Yeah.
And then the student replies, oh, then he's not a man. All men are mortal, and Socrates isn't mortal, therefore he's not a man. This is not a guess, it's a logical certainty.
Yeah, and then this line that I like a lot, he says, the fundamental problem with arguing that things are true by definition is that you can't make reality go a different way by choosing a different definition.
Yeah.
And this is like, I'm trying to think of a culture war-y example of people muddying definitions. But
well, I think the Socrates one is perfect in that regard, because they're saying he is mortal by definition because he's a man.
Right. And but then they see their definition proven wrong. They're what they believed to be a deduction, which so that's the problem, is that they're not doing deductive reasoning, they're doing inferential reasoning. They just think they're doing deductive reasoning. Yeah, then it's like, oh, well, I guess it must be a different thing. But the problem is, like, And this is, if it went the other way and he died, well, like they could just say, well, actually, no, mortal people aren't susceptible to hemlock.
I think the thing that Eliezer brings out as the problem is that he says we can never know for certain if Socrates is a human until after he's observed to be mortal.
Right.
So it doesn't actually tell you anything that you don't already know.
And I liked his parenthetical there. It's not even infinite certainty because, he could rise from the grave the next night, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or sign up for cryonics or something, right?
Yeah.
And this is where it's like, all right, well, then what does mortal even mean?
Again, that's why we shouldn't just define things as true by definition.
Exactly.
Yeah, he says that evidence favoring a hypothesis is evidence which we are more likely to see if the hypothesis is true than if it is false, which is a standard thing about Bayesianism, which is just good to remember.
Yeah. I already gave my reaction to the logic can't tell you anything you didn't know, so that's basically all I had for this.
Yeah, he goes, syllogisms are valid in all possible worlds, and therefore observing their validity never tells us anything about which possible world we actually live in. So the fact that all men are mortal and Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal, it's a syllogism. It is valid in all possible worlds, but you don't actually know if it applies in this world, because until you observe Socrates being mortal, you can't actually know if he's a man.
Yeah.
The validity of the syllogism didn't give you any evidence about the world, right?
Right. And it's one of those weird things where this is why I was trying to think of like real world examples, because no one argues like this in real life on such obvious cases. Like, whatever, dogs have 4 legs. That thing has 4 legs, therefore it's a dog. No one says that. Or dogs have 4 legs. Well, this is a dog with 3 legs. Well, then it's not a dog. That's not how anyone really talks. But it is the standard outline of how they err when they're thinking this way.
Yes, it does happen a fair bit about non-dog issues, I think.
Yeah, totally.
Like, is a taco a sandwich?
I remember it was like, whatever, must have been some internet question of the week, because I remember hearing it a bunch of times in, I don't know, several years ago, but somebody at work was like, is water wet? I indulged at first, and I was like, sure, why not? And it's like, well, no, but wet is something that's covered in water. And I was like, well, water is surrounded by water. And they're like, no, but it has to be something not water. And I was like, all right, well, let me just, then I finally fell back and I was like, all right, what would you expect to see differently if water wasn't wet versus if water is wet? Mm-hmm. And then I remember he got annoyed and didn't like that line of reasoning. But I was like, all right, if we're going to pretend like this actually matters, then how does it actually matter?
Right, yeah. He was just having fun with the masturbation aspect of philosophy.
I think he thought he stumbled across like a clever question, and I thought that it was a silly question, and he didn't like that I was kind of dismissive of it.
Okay.
But yeah, maybe I wasn't nice enough to him about it. I said it like I said it to you. I wasn't like a dick, but I was like, all right, I don't think this is actually that interesting. But it
does tie in well with the Parable of the Dagger. I think probably these should always be like combined when presented, because the jester thought that by proving the syllogism written on the boxes, he was proving something about the real world, but he wasn't, because just knowing that the syllogism on the boxes is valid doesn't actually tell you anything about the world that you live in.
Yep. I think that's all I have to say. So, all right. Yeah,
cool.
That's strong wrap up there. Good job, Steven.
Yay! Yeah, you're the best. I guess that kind of sounded like me being snarky, but
no,
you are the best, so I apologize.
No. I picked up what you're putting down.
Okay.
I appreciate it. All right, next week, or next fortnight, we have words as hidden inferences and extensions and intentions.